everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Diane and in my studio we make videos showing you in detail and in real time how to paint beautiful loose watercolours. Today we're going to paint a magical landscape of the Mont Saint-Michel in Normandy, France, which several of you have requested. We release a new video almost every day, so if you want to paint for relaxation with no stress, please consider subscribing to my channel so you don't miss any of my fabulous content. And don't forget to hit like and the bell for notifications so you really keep up to date. So let's get started. Okay, so I live in France. I don't live in Normandy, but I live in Brittany. And the Mont Saint-Michel is a subject which I've often painted, and here's an oil painting I did a few years ago. And I'm going to use this painting, it's a postcard of the painting. I'm going to use that as my reference material, as well as my own imagination and memory. I've also got a couple of other paintings of the same subject hanging in the studio too. So all of those are going to feed into this interpretation which I'm going to do today. So I've drawn in the horizon line on my sheet of watercolour paper, 140-pound paper of some unknown provenance. Not sure what it is, but it looks fine to me. I've drawn in the horizon line just over halfway up the paper. A good rule to remember is never to put your horizon exactly smack bang in the middle because it doesn't look so good. And you do want a good deal of foreground in this painting because the foreground, as you will have seen from the reference photo at the beginning of this video, the foreground is quite important. And then I've just lightly sketched the outline of the shape of the Mont Saint-Michel itself, no detail at all. And with a large brush I'm wetting the background and now dropping in some Naples Yellow around the island itself, just very lightly to give an effect of light behind the island. And now I'm going to come in with some ultramarine, which always reacts really well with Naples Yellow, and the ultramarine obviously is going to form the sky. We're going to have a kind of slightly light blue but slightly cloudy-ish misty kind of sky, and this is the first layer. Now there's quite a lot of water in the background there, so I'm going to tilt the paper a little bit. I've got a little easel here, so I'm just going to stand it up so that the paint flows down a little bit to give a more natural effect, and that will avoid it pooling on the paper because the paper is bound to buckle a little bit as it gets wet. And now I'm adding a few more strokes of ultramarine just to darken it down a little bit, but I'm not going to interfere with the yellow behind the island. I'm going to try and let that just absorb what it wants to from the blue as it flows down. I've got my hake brush here, or hake, or whatever you want to call it. I think this is a Ron Ranson special. And I'm just picking up a little bit of indigo on my brush. And the idea of this is to give a rough, broken effect. It's called dry brush technique. And I'm just brushing in some indigo very, very lightly across the front of the foreground here, and up to where the island sits on the horizon. You need to take a very light approach, very light touch to get that to work properly. And now back to my large round brush, and I've picked up some more Naples Yellow here, and I'm adding that to the dry brush effect and allowing backruns and mixtures to occur more or less spontaneously on the paper. And then back again to a little bit of indigo and just sweeping that across to cover most of the white paper, but notice how I'm leaving plenty of white space. I think it's quite important to notice that you don't cover the whole paper. And now, again with the large round brush, I'm picking up some dilute Winsor and Newton Violet, which is probably tinged a little bit with a tiny bit of blue, and I'm just dropping that into the island. very lightly, and now I'm softening the edges, doing some lost and found edges there, so that the whole thing becomes very misty and indistinct. And now I'm coming in with some indigo again on my round brush, and I'm just indicating, emphasizing the base of the island, where I know in reality there are some trees growing, and then the whole of the Mont Saint-Michel is covered in buildings, but I don't want to go into any detail about that. I'm just going to indicate some shadow to give the rough impression that something is going on there. So with a very, very light indigo on top of the violet, when that's dry we'll get a very subtle effect. I'm just making sure that I point out the church on the top there, and that's where we're at the moment, and I'm going to let that dry. Okay, the painting's dry now, and I can continue on with the next stage, which is with my large round brush. I'm going to go in and re-wet the sky with clean water, because I need to emphasize the blueness. I need to go in and reinforce the blueness of the sky. So I will mix up a little bit of Naples Yellow, Violet and Ultramarine to give me a greyish kind of blue colour, which I'm going to drop in to indicate the clouds. And then I'll let that just disperse itself without too much fiddling. That will settle into quite a natural looking sky. And the next step is going to be to go to the flat brush and pick up some more indigo, and then I'm going to be doing dry brush strokes across the horizon line there to indicate the distance. And this is a marshy area, so there's a lot of water lying on the ground here in the distance near to Mont Saint-Michel. Sometimes it's completely flooded when the tide comes in. So I'm going to use my artistic license and indicate some reflections in the marshy ground, which will also help to create a focal point in the painting. It will increase your attention towards the center of the painting. And now I'm just lifting out with a dry brush. I'm doing some lifting out of areas of paint to increase the impression of reflections. And now with some darker indigo, just emphasizing the lines in the distance with a broken line, keeping it all very loose. And now, having let the painting dry for a couple of minutes, I'm coming in with a very, very light wash of Naples Yellow, which I'm brushing over the entire foreground, right from the very front of the painting all the way up to the island. And this is to give a unifying effect. And now with my watercolour pencil, which dissolves when it hits water, I'm just bringing in some sharp darks to define some areas, just to give some interest to the painting, and just a little bit here on the island as well to emphasize the shape of the buildings on the island. Meanwhile, the yellow wash has been drying, and I can come back in and put the sheep in the distance here with my, this is Winsor and Newton Designer Gouache, which is a quite opaque white paint, which choose the place to put the sheep where you've got some of the darkest darks in the distance so they stand out. And you might have to come back in and go over them a second time to make them stand out, because although it's supposed to be opaque, it does tend to dry a little bit translucent. So a couple of sheep there in the distance. And once the painting is completely dry at this point, now's the time to add the spatter to give the foreground texture. So I've got Indigo again on my toothbrush, which I have spattered in the front here on the right hand side, a little bit part way up painting, and now a slightly different mix. So Indigo to start with, and now a little bit of brown, just to add some variety. And then with my rigger, I'm just flicking in some indications of some grasses and some reeds. Just some calligraphic marks there to keep the eye busy, looking at the painting, something to do. And spattering some larger drops. You can spatter very finely with the toothbrush, but if you use a rigger and you load it well with some loose paint, you can get some larger drops, which is nice too. A few lines in the background, and emphasizing again that horizon line to draw attention to the focal point of the painting, which of course is the Mont itself. And then just softening that line a little bit with clean water. And a few lines on the mount itself. Again, this is the important part of the shadow, just really now bringing the buildings on the island to life. Just need a delicate touch here. And to add to the life again, let's put in a few birds in the sky. There's always birds flying around Mont Saint-Michel, seagulls. Just using the tip of the rigger. There's a cross on the top of the church there, but I think it's too far away, too far in the distance for that to be visible, so I'm not going to try to draw the cross. That would look silly. Just a few more darks on the island itself here. And the roof of the church. And then the last final few strokes. And here's the final painting, dry and ready for the shadows under the sheep, just as the last indication of three-dimensionality. And there we are, one magical Mont Saint-Michel. I hope you enjoyed this painting and that you have a go at it yourself. Please hit like and subscribe, as it really helps us as we try to grow our channel. And as a subscriber, you will hear whenever I put up not only a new video, but also information on the community tab, where I will be posting regularly extra information and polls, and just generally establishing a community feel on there. So give it a try, subscribe please, and come and see me there. Thanks for being with me today. It's a cold and snowy day, but the sun has come out and it's starting to look really lovely out there. Time for lunch, and I'll be back in the studio this afternoon working on another video for your pleasure. So it's goodbye from me, goodbye from the dogs and the birds outside on the bird table, and goodbye from Tamsin. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.